Hello, my lovely learners. Welcome to Bloom and Grow Education. My name is Meredith. Today's lesson is a writing lesson suitable for Year 5 students who are applying for the Gifted and Talented test. It is part of the Some Risks Are Worth It series. And so we are looking at this stimulus. And what we're going to be doing in this lesson is reading through one of my students' stories and having a look at what she's done well and some areas that she could improve. The last goal. Mickey, aged 25, is a superstar at footy. During these 10 seasons, Mickey has won Most Valuable Player 5 times. This year, he's thinking of retiring. Mickey played for the Fremantle Dockers with extravagant goals over the season. He was a big fish in a little pond. Mickey confirms to the devastated crowd that he was leaving this season. The only problem was, what will Mickey do after he retired? Where will he find a job? Mickey was diagnosed with ADHD when he was 13. Mickey was also illiterate, which means he cannot read. It was intriguing that he plays footy and still fights his ADHD. The season kicked off with a terrible start. Now nearly no one comes to the team games, while on the other hand, the other team's popularity increased. What if I had become homeless? Thought Mickey. Mickey flinched as he remembered he could not focus in the first few games due to his resignation this year. He thought he had to make the right choice. A few games later. This is a semi-final, West Coast Eagles versus Fremantle Dockers. The Freos need to win this match to go into the finals. Let's go, Eagles, let's go, said the majority of the crowd. This time, Mickey actually focused for a bit, and then the Freos won. 2-0. It was a very narrow game. Hey, Mickey, I just remembered you don't have one more goal till you beat the legend, asked one of the reporters eagerly. Then he remembered, yes, I do. Well, Mickey never got that goal. He died the day before the last game, tragically. Okay, let's have a look at some of the things that she has done well. So we've got a title, we've got paragraphing, we have got a good story arc. I like the way that she has brought in these ideas of the illiteracy and the ADHD and the homelessness. Those are really good ideas. Let's have a look at areas where she could improve. Remembering that if you are demonstrating that you are academically gifted, that you are in the top 3% of all the Year 6s in Western Australia, then you need to be able to show that you can think differently to other students. Now, a story about the Dockers versus the Eagles is not something that is particularly unique. It's something that, this was a female author, but something most boys would probably write about. So where the uniqueness came in, where the possibility came in, was bringing in the illiteracy, the homelessness, and the ADHD element. So I will admit that football is not my thing, but I'm going to imagine that there are probably quite a few star football players who have ADHD who spent their childhood running their sillies out on the football oval and probably didn't spend a lot of time in class focusing on their literacy. And I would say that's probably pretty common. And when I was in my first year of teaching, I went on an excursion to one of either the Dockers or the Eagles, I can't remember. And they were talking about this exact issue where the players get to the end of their career and they have nothing else. And so they have to make sure that the players, particularly the younger players, have other things set up for after in their career. So they've got businesses or TAFE educations or university education, so that when they get too old or get the final injury or whatever it is that ends their career, that they've then got something else to go on to, because there are huge problems with some of those star football players where what they get into is drugs, and then they're in jail, and there's this whole wealth of problems. And this is not uncommon just in football. You also see this in things like soldiers, in war veterans, that there's huge problems with alcoholism and homelessness and things like that, because the only thing they've ever known is the army. So actually leaning in to those problems shows a unique idea and shows the ability to think creatively outside your immediate world, to think about the social issues within our society and the things that sporting people are experiencing. And experiencing beyond the glitz and the glow of, oh, he's a star football player, and what's actually going on behind that. So that's showing your ability to think big, to think uniquely. But it's also difficult to think like that because you're children and because you don't have that huge world experience. And the thing that you know about is the glitz and glamour of the game and not those social issues behind it, because we tend to protect, as adults, we tend to protect you from some of those horrible things. So it's about finding that balance there. So where could this student have gone? So I would have kept this introduction, this part of showing that he has had an amazing career and he's super popular, and he's really lived this high life of popularity and money and living his childhood dream, despite these problems with the ADHD and the illiteracy. And then here, this is when I would have gone on a new path. And I would have spoken about him, what his life is like now that he has left, and making the problem about how do you create a whole new career at, say, I don't know, 30, 35, however old it is that they are when they retire. When you have no literacy, no education, you can't focus because of the ADHD, what do you do? And really get into how much he's struggling, how emotionally painful it is, and really get stuck into the emotion. Maybe he does become homeless. Maybe he can't feed himself, and you can use that to lead into some of the homelessness issues in our society. Maybe he has to rely on friends who are bad influences. And then from there to do your resolution as, well, you could go a happily ever after where he finds a new passion as a there was one famous cricketer, I think he was a cricketer, I can't remember, this was when I was your age, and he became like a weatherman. So he discovers his new passion as a weatherman on the news. Or maybe he works out that he can develop a really good training career of training new footy stars, like young people. Or he gets asked to become the new coach. Or maybe you go down the sadly ever after route where he ends up in jail, which is what happens with some of these players. Maybe he, I don't know. I mean, maybe he ends up in jail is really the only thing that I can think of. I mean, unless you kill him off, or maybe he's in a terrible car accident and he becomes paralyzed or loses a leg and he can never play football again. But you have to be sort of careful with that idea because that's sort of leading into a new problem. So that's what I'm trying to show you, that try to lean into these more sophisticated, real world, out in our society problems that a football player would actually experience at his retirement, and then make your choice about whether you do a happily ever after or a sadly ever after. The last thing I would like to talk about is this conclusion. This is a kind of conclusion, and you get this in that plan as well, where you get marked down where you have a cliffhanger ending, or and it was all a dream, and then a fairy godmother came and magicked it better with her wand, or some kind of, it was all fixed. And this is that same kind of ending where it was all over. It was all terrible. Like this ending in here. Then he remembered. So there's like this. The conclusion is setting up for something else. So it's establishing a new problem. You've got one more goal till you beat the legend. So then it makes you think that he's going to come in and with his career and create that last goal. He's going to do one more season. It's going to be his top season. And then he dies tragically. And then it's not an ending. It's not an ending or a conclusion. It's a stop. So this ending, it needed to either the child needed more time to be able to put on that last put on another paragraph to wrap up this idea and do a happily ever after, or this idea in here needed to be taken out and it needed to be concluded in another way. Because so she's introduced another idea here right at the end and hasn't had enough time to conclude it properly. So either take out this idea and conclude it in another way, or ideally, if she had more time, put another paragraph which actually concludes this idea off down here. Okay, so I hope that has been helpful to you, to help you to see how we want to elevate our unique ideas away from things that students would typically write about into sometimes more societal issues, which really help to show your maturity and your ability to think critically and creatively and outside of the box, which is what a gifted child can do. Okay, that brings me to the end of the lesson. Thank you very much for joining me, and I'd love it if you could please thank me in return by liking this video and subscribing to my YouTube channel. And don't forget to check out the description box below, where you can see the links to the other lessons in this series, which is called Some Risks Are Worth It. I'll see you at the next lesson.